Hey folks, we're in the Pep Radio newsroom, keeping up with the news as fast as possible. We aren't going to wait to keep all this information until tomorrow morning. We wanted to share this with you immediately. Here then are tonight's news bites of stories we will be covering tomorrow morning and throughout the day. Trump signs executive order aimed at curtailing gender transitions for kids. President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed an executive order aimed at curtailing gender transitions for people under age 19. It's the latest push by Trump to reverse policies set by the Biden administration to protect transgender people and their care. On Monday, Trump directed the Pentagon to conduct a review that is likely to lead to them being barred from military service. The order directs that federally run insurance programs, including TRICARE for military families and Medicaid, exclude coverage for such care and calls on the Department of Justice to vigorously pursue litigation and legislation to oppose the practice. In other news, Senate Democrats denounce Trump's January 6th assault pardons. Senate Democrats are pushing a resolution that condemns President Donald Trump for pardoning January 6th rioters who were found guilty of assaulting police officers at the Capitol, but their effort was halted by Republican leadership. Every Senate Democrat signed on to the resolution earlier this week, and the caucus tried Tuesday to speed it through the Senate through unanimous consent process. However, Senator John Barrasso, the number 2 Senate Republican leader, objected to passage of the bill. In other news, Homeland Security Secretary talks to agency staff for the first time. No mention of immigration. The new Secretary of Homeland Security says the agency will do everything we can to protect the American people as she addresses the agency's staff for the first time. We do have challenges. The world is a dangerous place. Just ask my dogs. Oh, too soon? We've got dangerous people, like me. Foreign governments that want to take us down, said Kristi Noem, former governor of South Dakota. Anyway, she made no mention of the agency's role in immigration on border security during her address to the agency's 260,000 staff on Tuesday. Noem just started out her day in New York to watch immigration enforcement operations. In other news, Scott Bessent is sworn in to his role as Treasury Secretary. South Carolina investor Scott Bessent was sworn in to his role as Treasury Secretary on Tuesday by U.S. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. His first day of work included meetings with senior Treasury officials, according to a Treasury news release. He was confirmed by the U.S. Senate on a 68-29 vote Monday, with 16 Democrats voting in favor of making him the nation's 79th Treasury Secretary. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz slams Trump for the funding freeze, says he will join in suing for an injunction. According to the latest we have from the Associated Press, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz slammed President Donald Trump for the funding freeze, while Attorney General Keith Ellison said he would be joining with other Democratic attorneys general in suing for an injunction to block the president's action. Walz, who was the Kamala Harris's running mate in the 2024 election, said Trump did not get a mandate for such draconian action. I understand that the people voted and Kamala Harris and I lost an election to Donald Trump, he said. 77 million people voted for him. That's 23% of the entire population of the United States. That is not a mandate to squash the Constitution. It's not a mandate to break the law. It's not a mandate to throw out all of the things that we know that make this country work well. Walz and Ellison spoke at a news conference at a St. Paul YMCA that depends on the kind of federal funding for children's education programs that's now at risk. Walz, a former congressman, also blasted the sycophants in Congress who are supporting Trump's actions. And this just in. Donald Trump offers all federal workers a buyout with 7 months' pay in an effort to shrink the size of government. The White House on Tuesday began offering buyouts worth 7 months of salary to all federal employees who opt to leave their jobs by February 6th, part of President Donald Trump's unprecedented overhaul of the U.S. government. A memo from the Office of Personnel Management, the government's human resources agency, lists 4 directives that it says Trump is mandating for the federal workforce, including that most workers return to their offices full-time. It includes a deferred resignation letter for federal employees wishing to participate. And let's see, this is the last of the news bites. Democratic state attorneys general are bringing a lawsuit against the Trump administration. Just minutes after a federal judge in Washington, D.C. blocked the funding freeze, Democratic state attorneys general brought their own lawsuit against the Trump administration. The lawsuit, filed by 22 states and the District of Columbia in federal court in Rhode Island, criticized the administration for implementing the freeze before it was to take effect at 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Cutting off federal funding and grants threatens states' ability to provide essential benefits for residents, pay public employees, satisfy obligations, and carry on the important business of government, the lawsuit said. A word of caution from us. Don't expect any input from the Pennsylvania Attorney General, who just happens to be a Republican and wouldn't dare speak against the pumpkin Führer. These are just some of the stories breaking at this hour. Our news team is going to need help. If you know of news breaking that impacts the LGBTQ plus or other marginalized communities, please let us know by messaging us on Blue Sky at Pep Radio or by email at pepradio@pepaequality.com. We'll be back in the morning with updates on these stories as they become available. For now, that's the latest news. This is Dave Moore for Pep Radio News. Now it's time for the latest weather forecast here on Pep Radio.